Your worship.
Great, thank you. All right, council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of September 10th, 2024 to order with the adoption of the agenda. So I want to make that motion for me, please. Councillor Devlin, Councillor Cherry, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of August 27th. Councillor Devlin, seconded by Councillor Staphenhurst, all in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I'm just trying to get, I have a question regarding item number 594. Sorry, B. Yeah, the Thomas Brook. Sorry, am I in the right spot?
4B.
Yeah, that's correct. So I just had a follow-up question. So I was trying to find, just so specifically on the through to the planner, I just had a question regarding the 1,000 square meter threshold item. And if that was a policy or just, I couldn't find it. So was that a policy item or the 1,000? We talked about the OCP and the council policy. It was discussed at length. And I was just doing a little bit of review, and I was trying to understand that 1,000 square meter.
Ms. Hartman?
Through your worship to councillor on that item, this is from last
Yeah.
night on the last agenda. That 1,000 square meters is within the zone. That zone, the RTA one, was created based on an application that changed the designation for Thomas Brook Area to Resort Fringe. So the RTA one zone was created with the Lead Lost Road Lodge application, and that was the zone that was appropriate for the Thomas Brook properties. And we set it at 1,000 square meters for a lot size that may be appropriate to have those uses on the property. If a property is already zoned or already subdivided, and they would like to rezone to a zone that has a smaller minimum lot size, they can still rezone to that zone. However, their proposal needs to be in line with all policies as well. So it restricts subdivision, but we do look at the size of the lot, the layout of the lot, the width of the lot, to what they're proposing, and then it is an appropriate use for that size. So it's incorporated into the review. It's in the zoning bylaw.
Follow-up, Councillor?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, I am going to move on to announcements from the mayor. So I want to just welcome our new Economic Development Commissioner. I don't believe Ryan's in the room with us, but he is. Sorry, Ryan. Welcome. I want to say we are happy to have you here, and pleased to see that you're in the room, in the office. You're welcome to come to the podium here, and so all of council can see you and meet you. We're grateful for that. Do you have any words?
Speech. It's midway through day 2, Your Worship. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all for having me in this lovely community. I'm coming over from Invermere, for that Golden, for that Ontario. So I've been around a lot of small, very vibrant, resilient communities, and I'm looking forward to adding value to yours.
Great. Appreciate you being here. Thank you again. I'm going to go on and mention that Luna is coming up in another week or so, week and a half, September 20th to 22nd, and looking forward to all of that. And then just a reminder, kids are back in school. Please be cognizant of school zones as we're traveling about our community. All right, I'm going to move on to recommendations from the committee. So Public Infrastructure Committee recommendation, DCC bylaw. And Councillor Palmer, any comments or anything from Mr. Blah?
Yeah, so before I put the motion on the table, this is what came from the committee. We had quite a very good overview of the DCC bylaw and the merits behind that. It was the committee was there, and in addition, Matt Cherry, Councillor Cherry was there as well. And it was a good discussion. And so this is what came out of that recommendation for Thursday. Now, I understand that with the staff resources that Thursday may or may not pose a problem, but this is the recommendation coming from, but I'll just hold off if there's an understanding that there's some resource challenges with having that on the council meeting or the committee of the whole on Thursday.
Ms. Floyd, comment?
Thank you. Joel Short will be presenting on Thursday.
Okay, perfect. So I'll put a motion on the table that the draft ECC development cost charge bylaw update be presented to the committee of the whole meeting on September 12th, 2024.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Lusow. Any further discussion on the motion? You want to speak to it any further, Councillor?
I'd love to, but I think I'll hold that for the committee of the whole. Yeah, it's super important. It was in our strategic priorities at the beginning of this council, and we need to move on it, and I'll avoid going at length at this time.
All right, thank you. All right, council, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to 8B, Finance Committee recommendation, Heritage Property Tax Exemption Request. Ms. Hartling, do you have an overview that you would like to present?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll just give a bit of an overview with this request for an updated resolution from the committee. It wasn't clear with the resolution that was drafted in front of you for the 0-year term commencing in the calendar year 2025, conditional that they follow the Heritage Revitalization Agreement. It would be clear if there is support from the committee. It just did seem like it was 50-50 on some of the terms of 2 years. There's 5 years requested. Whether council is not support at all of a tax exemption request, that wasn't clear with the resolution to staff. So what we have come up with here, and it doesn't have to be the 3 years, but after listening to the finance committee discussion and what was supported and what was not supported, staff felt a 3-year term was an appropriate recommendation based on the heritage restoration work that the applicant is undergoing. So for the first 2 years, it would be the taxes would be around the $2,400 mark, and then if the improvements did get evaluated, they would go up to $7,000. So you're looking at a total of 3 years as a tax exemption of $12,400 if the improvements do get recognized by that term. So staff are recommending that council consider, it doesn't have to be 3 years, but consider a term that they would be supportive of recognizing the heritage restoration works that the applicant is putting into the building that the city requires of this building. So we require this in the heritage conservation area and by the agreement to put in this restoration work to bring it up to a standard that's recognized on the heritage register. It's a community heritage building. So it's offsetting those costs at the front end, not after they are operating the short-term rental that council has allowed in the heritage revitalization agreement. So it really is recognizing the works for preservation of an important heritage building in the city and offsetting those immediate costs to bring it up to the heritage character.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hartling. So if I'm hearing you right, it's a way of showing incentives with those who want to preserve heritage. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that's correct. It is something that the Heritage Management Plan that was recently adopted does recommend as an incentive tool for property owners looking to do a full preservation restoration of the building that would be more substantial than restoring a house without heritage characteristics.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's either we put a motion on the table with a year term to be discussed and voted on, or we basically put a motion on that we do not support this motion. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct. That would be clear for a resolution.
For a resolution. All right. So council, does anyone have an appetite to put a resolution on the table and see if we get a seconder for that? Councilor Cherry?
Thanks, Your Worship. I move that heritage property tax exemption request for 714 Mackenzie Ave, Block 48, Section 27, Township 23, Range 2, west of the 6th Meridian, Kootenai District Plan 636B be granted for a 3-year term commencing in the calendar year 2025, condition that the property complies with Section 225 of the Community Charter and enters into a heritage revitalization agreement with the city that will restore, protect, and conserve and maintain the heritage attributes and improvements of the property.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? I will second the motion and discussion. Councillor, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I believe that the amount of work, time, and effort that's going to take to meet our heritage management plan as in our heritage, to meet the equivalent of our heritage management plan warrants a term of tax exemption, very simply put.
All right. And I'll weigh in as I've stated or asked staff regarding preserving heritage. If we want to show our community that we want to preserve heritage, having some sort of incentive, I think, is important. Offsetting the work initial investment is really what these funds would be going to. And it basically signals to our community members that heritage revitalization, in my mind, is important to us. So I'm going to ask if there's any other council that would like to speak to this motion. Seeing Councilor Palmer?
So I wasn't at the Mayor Sills, I wasn't at the finance committee.
Right.
I was at my mother's 90th birthday. So I was confused because of the two resolutions on the agenda. And I'll preface my comments regarding heritage, like I'm really excited that this property is going to get developed and, finally that's happening. So my first concern is on the procedural thing. So what I see from the minutes from the finance committee is there was a resolution, much the same thing except for 2 years, and that was defeated in a split vote. Yourself, Mayor Souls, and Councillor Devlin and Councillor Lucio were in favor, and so I'm assuming the rest weren't, and it was defeated on that basis. And then the next motion, which is fairly clear in my mind that essentially it's not there. So technically it's kind of awkward wording, but it's a 0 term, so basically nothing. And that was carried. So that's the recommendation coming from the finance committee, opposed with yourself, Mayor Souls, and Councillor Cherry. So it seems to me that 4 of those councillors at that meeting were supportive of the 0%. So that just raises a concern. And I don't know if I could just get a bit of clarity from the committee's perspective on that, what happened there.
Sure. And so Councillor Cherry.
I'd love to bring a little bit of that. So the discussion went on, the request was for a 10-year term. The discussion around the table was whether any term should be considered, whether a 2-year or whether a 5 or 10-year. It was a split vote. Any way you looked at it, and due to process of elimination, nobody could agree. I think it'd be the easiest way to sum that up. Yes.
Any other comments, Councillor Stakenhurst?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, what I'd like to weigh in is perhaps a little bit of a different perspective. And the discussion that I recall having was whether or not the citizens should be essentially funding the revitalization of a heritage property, which has been granted short-term rental status. Which is why the reason I didn't vote in favor of it originally. Because I don't believe that the citizens should be on the hook to pay for or subsidize any revitalization whatsoever when it's going to be ultimately used not for housing, but for short-term accommodations.
Councilor Lucette?
Thanks, Mayor Schultz. Yeah, and I think the first resolution that we brought forward was to cover their building times before their property would be eligible to be used for a short-term rental. That's why we had first gone with the 2-year term, which we supported. And I think after that, we weren't willing to support anything past that. And that's why we went down to the 0-year term.
Ms. Hartling, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just for a bit more context on the heritage tax exemption. So it was discussed in the finance committee, there was another tax exemption for the old school building. There is an aspect of the buildings after the heritage tax exemption, how they are used. The old school building was converted from a school building to a commercial profitable building with many commercial spaces in it and had to go through the heritage revitalization. It's taxed commercially now. In the long term, council has an increased tax rate off of that commercial building. While it offset the initial cost to revitalize that building. With this building, it's derelict. Instead of fully tearing it down, it's been in the community for 15 plus years. Basically, if anyone was to buy this property, they would demolish it and rebuild. However, it's protected heritage. So they're looking at doing significant restoration work to preserve this heritage building. In the long term, with those preservation works that they're putting into the building, the city will have increased taxes over the long term. So you will be getting more money in the long term by offsetting the 2 years or 3 years or whatever you were considering by incentivizing these restoration works.
Thank you. Councilor Plummer?
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I'm just curious if Councilor Devlin has anything further.
Yeah, I can speak to my own. So I was actually the one in the finance committee meeting who originally proposed the 2-year term. It was 10 years on the agenda. I thought 2 would cover the initial cost as looking at it as 2 separate things, one being the heritage revitalization and the second being the short-term rental. However, I do believe that allowing it to be used for short-term rentals, despite the fact that it doesn't fit the zoning, I mean, it does now, we've granted. I believe that is the incentive in my mind to build this. This is why they bought it. This was the plan they had. As a council, we're allowing that plan. I don't see the benefit of subsidizing what essentially amounts as a for-profit business. I was willing to see a 2-year for the initial building. The reason I'm not going to support this is not because of the 3-year term that's now been put on the floor. It's because the finance committee very clearly made it clear as a whole that they would not support anything, and I don't see revisiting it now with a slightly different number plugged in as being sort of honest governance in my eyes. I think it was very clear that it was not supported there, and I don't think I'll be changing my mind on this.
Great. So Councilor Orlando has his hand up. We'll go to him next.
Your worship, thank you. Yeah, I don't support a tax exemption for this property. As stated by other councilors at our last meeting, we approved a heritage agreement that allowed for vacation rental property or vacation rental use, which I think is a significantly higher generator of revenue for this property. So I wouldn't support the direction of tax exemption moving forward on this property.
Great. Thank you. And Councilor Staplenhurst and Councilor Plummer.
I just wanted to echo the comment of Councilor Devlin. I do find it problematic that this is back in front of council after, in my opinion, the finance committee was pretty clear as to not granting any exception for tax purposes. And I'm a little disappointed to see it on the agenda with a different term in front of the request.
And so with the term 0 years, staff felt that was problematic after we voted, or it was a split vote. We should have dropped it rather than add anything. That was at committee level, so now comes to council to finalize this. And it's either do not support this or pick a term. And a motion's been on for a term. If you're not happy about supporting this, then you can vote it down. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. Thank you from the other councillors for the clarification of the dynamics there. I have 2 or 3 points,
Sure.
Mayor Souls. So first, just on the process stuff, when there's a recommendation coming from committees, my expectation is that is what will be on the agenda. We don't have to support it. That's true. And so and actually caught me off guard because I read this because of the bold that the recommendation was for one thing, but it actually wasn't. It was something else. So that really, even if they're poorly worded recommendations, they should be verbatim coming to council.
Okay, thank you for that.
In mind. So on the merits of that, everybody here, notwithstanding what happened in the committee, can change their mind from that point and vote. I am concerned specifically on giving a benefit to one party. And the history doesn't matter to me, actually. It's moving ahead. Again, I'll speak to this particular one. I'm excited about that. And in general, revitalization bylaws, I think, can be very effective. I get concerned about picking and choosing. So we can talk about tax benefit. Well, any derelict building that gets rebuilt is going to have higher taxes in the future. So that's not the argument here. The merits of heritage could be a very valid thing, and I've worked with other communities on revitalization bylaws. So a typical one may have happened in Revelstoke in the time you have a town district that you want to revitalize, so you have parameters for tax relaxation over a number of years, up to 10, I believe. And so you create a benefit for the community that's equal to everyone in that area. And so in this case, it's say in the Revelstoke Station Heritage Protection Area, if this council, and it may have happened in the past, there was a heritage revitalization bylaw that is common amongst everyone, that if you meet certain criteria, then you get that. You can apply and then under a revitalization bylaw that's already established and applies to everyone in that area. So having that dialogue in a bigger sphere, I would consider. I did have people contact me and it with concerns and saying, well, why don't I get this?
Right. Okay.
And so there's this fairness issue. Again, I'm very supportive of this redevelopment, and I could possibly be supportive of a revitalization, but I think that's something that we should look at a broader perspective. And on the basis of fairness and on process, I will be opposed to the motion.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any other comment from council before I call a question? Councilor Chair.
Yeah, I have a question, Mayor Sauls, just in relation to some of the comments I just heard. Through the chair to staff, am I correct in believing that anybody that enters in a heritage, sorry, I'm going to screw up my terminology here, that anybody that complies with section 225 of the community charter and enters into a heritage revitalization agreement with the city has the option to apply for this?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct. If a property, 225, like, if they have a heritage revitalization agreement or if they're part of the heritage register, then they can apply for a tax exemption for that. And it's a maximum term of 10 years that they can apply for. What Council Palmer was talking about is through the heritage management plan, we do have so many action items to look at as program items. Currently, it is case by case where an applicant would have to apply by a heritage tax exemption bylaw request on an individual basis. We don't have the heritage revitalization bylaw process in place, so it's permissive tax exemption requests at this time individually by bylaw.
Okay, so then I guess my question is, I guess my comment is, I don't see where the unfairness comes in. And if there is a way to make this more fair, I'm all for that. I'm not followed it.
Council Palmer?
Yeah, from my perspective, the unfairness is we're debating somewhere between 10, was that 10, 2, 3, 0, the next one, 10, 3, what?
Oh, so you want, okay.
Yeah, I would like to, and also if the bylaws, if we create a bylaw that allows, if that's the intent on a case-to-case basis going ahead, that everyone gets this. It can apply and get it without going through this process that we're doing right now. It's much easier and much fairer. And so that's my point.
So removing the option to vote on it versus.
Yeah, I would support a review or something, whether we want to do that at this time, but yeah.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. So if you vote in favor, you're voting for a 3-year term. If you oppose it, there is no support and it's dead at that point. All those in favor? So note that, opposed, please. Note that this motion is defeated. Councillor Cherry and Mayor Sells were in favor. Balance of council were opposed. This motion is defeated. Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I'd just like to put a motion that staff consider reviewing the potential of heritage property exemption on a broader perspective. I'm going to leave it pretty vague, because I don't know what the workload is there.
Sure.
But I'll put that motion on the table. If there's a second, I'll speak to it.
Councillor Cherry is going to second that.
Yes.
So I'll just speak to it. I don't want to get bogged down, and I don't think we're in place right here and staff resources and that kind of thing. I would like to, applaud the applicant at 714 Mackenzie Avenue. It might not feel like that right now. But I think this is really important for fairness in the community. So there is, possibly a potential in the future.
Great. All right. Thank you. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, just a question through the chair to Councillor Palmer. So the motion is to direct staff to investigate this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I used the word review the potential.
Review.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm not creating an intentional, an absolute workload.
Yeah. I guess my thought is my feeling is I don't know. I would probably want to hear from staff first to see what they think about that. I don't know if I'd support that in that the applications that have come forward in my time on council over the years, and they have been few, really have been a case-by-case basis, and they've been different. So, for example, if this application was not associated with a hotel, vacation rental type application that was charging residential tax rates already, and it was just a pure residential conversion, I would consider it. So for me, that's real case by case. And some other things such as the Mountain View building, was an exception in the sense that it was a conversion from a school to a commercial building. And so I kind of feel that there is some appropriateness to the case by case basis. And furthermore, we have heard from staff that they are, especially staff who would work on that review, are under a real heavy stress and workload right now. So I kind of feel like it's might throw something in there that might create unnecessary burden. So that's my thought. And thank you for bringing it forward. I do appreciate it.
I'm going to ask Mr. Simon or Ms. Hartling to weigh in if you wouldn't mind.
To your worship, I wish all of council, Development Services is currently oversubscribed for 2024, 2025, and likely 2026 now. And this is before accounting for the half application that we're going to be talking about later today. So if we are successful with that half application, it's going to even put us a little bit more behind the 8 ball. So definitely caution council, you can always direct us to do whatever work you deem appropriate and in the interest of the community. However, there will be delays with respect to other policy projects that are on the go right now, as well as current planning applications that are being processed by the department.
Appreciate the input, Councilor Plum.
Yeah, so, wherever this motion goes, like if we defeat it, it's probably diminishing any glimmer of hope for the applicant. And maybe that's appropriate. I left the wording vague enough that maybe staff will just come back and say what Mr. Simon just finished saying at a later date. So I'll vote in favor of the motion, but it's really going to be left in staff's hand whether there's some creative thing. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other comments, Councilor Dunn?
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna vote in support of it just because it sounds like it's not a very fleshed out idea and it seems like it's just gonna put more stress on staff to have to consider something that really isn't. I don't even know what we're asking them to do honestly, so
Okay.
I'll be voting against that one.
Councilor Luciano, did you have your hand?
Yeah, thanks, Marshals. Yeah, I'm gonna follow suit with Councilor Devlin and Councilor Orlando. I think staff are a little bit oversubscribed, and I think the case-by-case basis of reviewing these allows us to be more fair than a blanket statement across all of the heritage applications.
All right. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Councilor Cherry, Councilor Palmer, all those opposed? Balance of councils opposed, motion's defeated. Thank you. Moving on to item C, Finance Committee recommendation, permissive tax exemptions. Someone want to put the motion on the table for me, Councilor Lucelle?
Finance Committee moves that the bylaw for the 2025 permissive tax exemptions be prepared according to the following list, amended to exclude community partners or others relief society.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Devlin. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried. Thank you. All right. Get through this long list. We're going to go into item 9A, bylaws, engineering, subdivision development, servicing amendment bylaw. Mr. Black, is there a bit of a presentation or an overview before we move on this?
Thank you, Worship. No, there is not. Available for any questions with Council.
Okay. Council want to put this motion on the table for me, please. Councilor Luceno.
I move that subdivision development and servicing bylaw number 2392 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Cherry. Any further discussion on the motion? We've done the 3 readings previously, so we're now doing the adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 9B, Planning Department zoning amendment bylaw 2393. Ms. Hartling, do you have a brief overview on this?
Yeah, sure. So I'll do a brief overview and then you can answer any questions. And the applicant is in attendance today if you have any questions for them as well. So what you have in front of you, and there will be an application after this as well, is a historic rezoning application. This was submitted in 2016, prior to the current short-term regulations that have been updated into the current bylaw in 2022. So at the time, council was experiencing an inundation of rezoning applications, over 60 within 1 year of what we call spot zones of the R2B, R1B to allow for a home short-term rental or vacation rental use or a vacation rental use in a secondary suite. So these were all reviewed at the time, and 11 of those rezoning applications were put on, on hold in queue, and staff were directed to proceed with reviewing the short-term regulations and update them prior to then reviewing and bringing these applications forward to council. There was a long period of time that between 2017 to 2022, those regulations were not updated. And staff went out to the community prior to the regulations being updated, and went through 2 public hearings to get to where we are today. And then also, council adopted those regulations in 2022, as well as a short-term rental and bed and breakfast policy that really guides how staff and council are to review any applications that may come in. That policy does speak to the spot zone applications that were in the queue. And after those regulations came into place, staff contacted the applicants, giving them time to decide how they would like to proceed, whether they withdraw with a full refund or if they do want to proceed with their amending bylaw to council. The policy is outlining that there's no guarantee of support. Staff are not support of the R2B, R1B spot zones for short-term rental. And they're bringing forward 2 today that would like to proceed for a final decision by council. I can answer any questions with regards to those key policies, land use designations, and then also that specific short-term rental and bed and breakfast policy.
Okay. Does someone want to put the motion on the table and then we can ask questions? Councillor Lano?
Your worship, yes, I will. So I move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2393 be denied.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Devlin. Further discussion on the motion at this time. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Souls. Just wanted some clarification on the policy, so that's referred to in the report. So that was a policy April 14th, 2022. The review date, which is explicit within the policy as well, is October 2023, where council was supposed to go through a whole host of things. So the first question is, did that review happen? The second question is, there was talk about this regulation. Did that supersede this? And because I'm not quite following that aspect.
Ms. Hartman, comment?
Yeah, through your worship, so council did make a decision, I believe it was in January, and Mr. Simon can correct me if I'm wrong with the dates, to hold off on doing a full review of the short-term rental regulations to then bring back a discussion this fall, whether staff are to pursue reviewing that and doing a larger analysis. So that discussion on proceeding with a larger review has yet to come to the council table. So that this policy would be part of that. I'm not sure if Mr. Simon would like to expand on that.
Mr. Simon?
To your worship, staff did bring forward a report as per the policy. I believe it was just around 18 months after adoption of the policy. I'd have to double check the specific date. But I would know that that was intended for looking at short-term rental regulations kind of cohesively as part of an overall city review, rather than dealing with these individual site-specific spot zoning applications that are before you today. So they're kind of 2 different things. And Sartling is correct. In January 2024, we did have a discussion with council after Bill 35 came in from the province, and the decision was made, let's defer further discussion of short-term rental until October because of the workload of the department, and we do anticipate bringing that forward for council for further discussion in October.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. And further to that, we were looking at this as well to see if there was any change with the rules coming down from the provincial government. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yeah, it'll be a bit of a complicated process depending on what we're trying to achieve with short-term rental regulations moving forward, but that will be a really good discussion at a later date. Right now, what's really before council is you have a couple of old spot zoning applications that have been on hold since 2016, 2017. The applicants have the option. We had 11 of them. They were given the option to either proceed to council. They understood that staff weren't going to be recommending support of their application, but that council could decide one way or the other, or they could apply for a full refund of their application fees. We had 9 out of 11 apply for refunds, and the other 2 who wanted to proceed are now before council today for a decision.
Great. So Councillor Palmer, has this answered your questions?
Yes, in part. It raises a couple of concerns, Mayor Sol. So specifically, I could see where applicants, because there's policy, these are public policy and their council policy. So perhaps, landing on council here is at the very minimum, we should have reviewed that and been explicit with this policy. Because within this policy, it says, that it's after 18 months of the date of this policy. I won't go into all that detail, but I think it creates some confusion. And I think that's unfortunate because these applicants have put in money, and even though staff, good on them to, send out notices and stuff and provide that opportunity. And I sort of have a vague recollection. But it does raise some concerns on procedural fairness kind of thing.
Okay. And then, Mr. Simon, I'll let you speak, and then I'll just weigh in a bit too. Go ahead.
Sorry, to your worship, I just wanted to verify, I was just looking through prior council reports, and on January 9th, 2024, staff did bring forward a specific report outlining short-term rental regulation updates based on the policy that directed a report to come forward within 18 months. And at that time, council made the decision to defer further updates to short-term rental and the discussion on that until October 2024. So that was January 9th, 2024, which would have been, I believe would have been 19 months after counting April 2022.
Okay. And then my comment, so if indeed this bylaw gets denied and in October we relook at short-term rentals and we change the rules, then in a positive way, we say, yeah, we can go with short-term rentals, this applicant would have the chance to reapply at that time. Is that correct?
Your worship, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments from Councilor Orlando? You have your hand up.
Yeah, your worship, just a general comment on this item B. I do support the staff recommendation to deny the application. It has been a long and winding road with the V spot zoning. I did reach out to staff for clarification on technical points, and I'm satisfied with their answers. And my position is to support the recommendation as presented by staff.
Great. Appreciate the comment. Any other comments from council before I call the question? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Palmer and Councillor Stapenhurst are opposed. Balance of councils in favor. This motion is denied. Thank you. Moving on to item C, very similar. Ms. Hartling, overview.
Yeah, so this application is quite similar to one that you just reviewed. It's the other of the two spot zones. This is up on Lee Road in Arrow Heights. It's a single family dwelling with a suite, looking to operate a short-term rental within the main dwelling. And the applicant is looking to rezone to the R1 V zone for full home short-term rental. It's the same review and policy direction that staff have completed on this property and are recommending that the bylaw be denied.
Someone put the motion on the table for me, please. Councillor Devlin.
I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2394.
Second for the motion, Councillor Lusal. And Councillor Terry, you want to speak to it?
Thanks, Mayor. So I have a question through his staff. Has this applicant attempted to withdraw this application at all?
Through your worship, they did discuss withdrawing it within the time frame. It is to be presented to council, but there was discussions that they yesterday wanted to withdraw it.
Perfect. Then I will save my next comment and make another motion after this one's decided.
Okay. Any other comments, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Souls. So it's much the same as the other one. It's interesting, we had one last week, which occupied a fair bit of council time as well. A little bit different. So I'm just going to highlight a couple things. I'll be opposed to the motion, more on, so this clarity moving ahead. It's not critical of staff, the processes. It's been a messy process for a very, very long time. I will note that in our OCP, that the Arrow Heights that was adopted in 2022, after extensive public consultation and a lot of public money, I think well in excess of $100,000. So this was done and adopted by council. Arrow Heights neighborhood action items: create Arrow Heights neighborhood plan to guide future development within Arrow Heights neighborhood and to provide more specific guidelines for the development patterns and transitions with the resort neighborhood. And so there's an ambiguity as to what that really means. We saw that from a discussion before. In contrary with the one from last week was the Thomas Brook, which was explicitly, in my reading anyway, supportive of compatible vacation rentals with the resort. So the OCP is important. Now, the problem with these action items is, like we've heard, the planning department's oversubscribed. However, going back to the applicant, it's, you know, these are master documents that they look at in considering their application. And certainly last week, our last council meeting felt like we were actually going opposite to the OCP, in my view. And this one is concerned more of a grayish area. So I'll be opposed to the motion as it is right now, not because of the merits of it, but because of this overall processing.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor Solz.
Thanks for your explanation. Any other comments from council? Councilor Staples.
Yeah, I just wanted to state that I will also be opposed to this. I think the staff evaluation and where they state that the you know, obviously we're experiencing a shortage of housing and long-term rental accommodation. I believe that's partially true. I think we're experiencing a shortage of accommodation across the board. I don't think putting the onus on individual homeowners is the solution. And I think it's going to have some long-term negative impact on our community. And I think further to that, if the council was really adamant about solving some of the long-term housing solution, then perhaps some advocacy to UBCM to fix some of the problems with the BC Housing Rental Association, the Rental Tribunal Board. I think that would probably be a better avenue than short-term rentals enforcement. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Great. Appreciate your
Residential
comments.
tenancy board, you mean?
Sorry?
Residential tenancy board?
Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of denying? Those who are opposed, note Councilor Staples, Councilor Palmer are opposed. The balance of council is in favor. Just a moment. Balance of council in favor. This motion is denied. You have a second motion you would like to put on?
Yes.
Point of order.
Oh, pardon.
The motion is supported. You're supporting the denial.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that. Now, Councilor Cherry.
Thanks, Mayor Sauls. I would like to put on a motion that zoning amendment bylaw number 2393 and zoning amendment bylaw number 2394 be given a full refund, and I'll speak to it if I get a second.
Councilor Palmer. Who's seconding?
Thanks.
Councilor Cherry.
Yeah, through to council. Previous councils and staff had hung on to their money for 8 years. And from my question through the staff, whether or not either of these applicants had tried to withdraw, turns out one of them had. I'm worried that both the length of time and all of the confusing documents, and sub-documents, and policies, and procedures, and everything that's been updated over the last almost decade has not only tied up their money, but may have made it a bit confusing onto whether or not they should take the refund. With all that in mind, I think they should be given a full refund.
Great.
In this
Appreciate
case.
that. I will support that. I fully agree with that as well. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Although, do you have a question, Councilor Orlando?
Yeah, Your Worship. Just a question regarding past applicants. My understanding is that they would have gone to application and then if they were not successful, would not have received a refund. I was wondering if I could hear from staff about the implications of individually assigning refunds for applications, because in effect, although this decision was just made, it is retroactive to the decision.
Good point. Thank you for that. Any comments from staff, Ms. Hartley?
Yeah, through your worship, we do have within our fees bylaw, when we do bring applications forward, we do have a process for percentage of refund. So after reviewing it administratively, it's 90%. After referral, it's 50% before council review. So the applications are recouping staff time, the work to use work on the application. It's not using taxpayers' money for staff to work on individual applied for applications. So someone applies for the application, they're paying that fee to recoup the cost to go through that individually. Its council can process it or recommend a refund. However, staff did go through the full process of doing the review and bring it to council. So typically with any other application, it would be at 0%. However, it is up to council.
Councilor Palmer and Councilor Staples.
I'll let Councilor Staples go first.
I'll be in support of the motion. I think given the duration that these people have been waiting in queue, I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, Councilor Palmer.
So I am supportive of the concept. I think an important point has been raised. If this is by bylaw, council can't break bylaw by simple resolution.
Thank you for that comment.
And just some background information. I was thinking about the Thomas Brook application before because I think there was some confusion. So I'm on the basis of that, because if we do this, we may not be able to do it because we're breaking a bylaw and we can't do that without changing the bylaw. So on that basis, I'm going to make a motion to refer to staff.
Okay. Seconder for the motion to refer to staff, Councilor Cherry. So the previous motion, we will just let it go, refer it to staff, and go from there. All right. Councilor Orlando, do you want to weigh in with your hand up?
Your worship, yeah, thanks. I'm just not clear procedurally though. So is the first resolution or to refund it, is that withdrawn at this point? I can't remember if it received a secondary.
Councilor Palmer?
Yeah, so technically, the referral motion is non-debatable, but it just basically puts it back to staff.
Right.
And they'll figure out, it will come back to council at some point.
Right. Any comment? None? Okay. And so we don't need to vote on it. It's going to be referred to staff and we'll hear back. All right, we're going to move on to 11A, development permit amendment application, A Road. Ms. Hartley, your day.
Through your worship, this is Ms. Comer's file. I'm not sure if you want.
Oh, Ms. Comer's. I have a hard time seeing you behind all that equipment.
What's the speech though?
Well, come on up.
Come on up.
Air source is important here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we? Does that apply to personal privilege?
I didn't touch that, so, Ms. Comers, go ahead. If you'd like to give us an overview or presentation, however you like,
I do not have a presentation, but I have an overview that I can provide.
that would be wonderful.
So DP 004, 2022-004 is an amendment to an originally issued permit. It's for a multifamily residential and mixed-use development permit to amend the form and character of one 7-unit row house within the multifamily development permit area.
Right.
This is located in CD Zone 20, Comprehensive Development Zone 20, in the subsection Subzone C. The development permit area is the multifamily residential and mixed-use development permit area. The existing site context: the lands are located within the phase stoked living development accessed off of Hay Road, with internal roadways Keystone Crescent and Grizzly Lane, and they have access to municipal water and sewer services. The proposal overview, the changes are to the originally issued permit for the row houses for a 7-unit row house unit. Each one of these new row houses will include an attached garage at this time, access off the rear laneway. And they will be accommodating an interior parking spot for each dwelling unit. Changes also include a rooftop deck off of the rear garage, allowing the residents to have a little bit more of an outdoor amenity space. The dwellings will also be to the peak of the roof, 11.94 meters. Some of the changes also include cladding to the exterior. They've gone from the original 4 issued exterior looks, and at a discussion at APC, they went, the original permit application was for 1 change, but after an APC discussion, they went back to having 2 variations of look, and after the APC meeting, they also added in some timber wood columns and some timber accents to give it a little bit more form and character to the original issued permit. And staff are recommending approval of this amended DP application.
Great, thank you, Ms. Colmars. And just for clarity, this row house development, is that the very back of the lot? And then behind there is a bank, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, there's a steep slope and it's well wooded and treed.
Perfect, appreciate that. Does someone want to put the motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Cherry.
I move that amendment to development permit be issued for the form and character of a row house development containing 7 dwelling units at 1836 Hay Road and 1738 Grizzly Lane. Yes.
Second for the motion, please, Councillor Lusal. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Kwong?
So if I'm understanding, this is like pretty minor stuff, I'm assuming it's better. So you're talking about planning oversubscription of work, and also oversubscription of council work. It's something just to think about in the future. So are we creating processes that are maybe could have been delegated at a different level? So
And that's a good point. We can talk about that at some point regarding delegation and whatnot, but yeah. Any other comments from council on the motion? Seeing none, all is in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to 11B, the HAP fund application. And who in staff are going to give us a bit of an overview of that?
Staff do have a presentation if council would like to see, but otherwise we're happy to answer any questions you let us know.
Let's see it. Presentation, Councillor.
If I may put the motion on the table, I'm sort of jumping on it for a reason. And then we can have the presentation if there's a seconder. Mayor Souls, just for clarity, I'm just doing the first part of the motion.
Okay.
That staff submit a Housing Accelerator Fund Round 2 application that includes the initiatives as generally outlined in the council report dated September 10th, 2024, along with the additional required documentation to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
Okay. Second for the motion, Councillor Cherry. And we can now have a presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council. Nice to be back after a few months off. A little bit of a break for you guys. You didn't have to hear me talk for 3 full months, which was very nice. Mr. Gibson, Startling have done a fantastic job, and the whole team has been working tirelessly throughout the summer to try and address what was not very well advertised, HAF Round 2. So here we go again with it. Give a brief overview, just some background on the HAF program, kind of refreshing the memory. You may recall we brought this in August 2023 to look at HAF Round 1, go into the discussion, looking at the initiatives specifically that staff are proposing, council endorsed today to get behind the HAF application, and then conclude with the staff recommendation, which may not need, as we already have it on the table. So a little bit of background. What is HAF, the Housing Accelerator Fund? It's a federal grant program that ultimately is looking at incentivizing municipalities to facilitate housing approvals through various initiatives that are outlined in your HAF action plan. The objectives of HAF, looking at creating housing at an accelerated pace, enhance certainty in the approvals and building process, support the development of complete communities, and look at supporting affordable, inclusive, equitable, and diverse communities. HAF Round 2 is open until September 13th, so this Friday. We are looking to get council endorsement of the actions, which goes into our application as an approved council resolution. It does bode well for our application if council has endorsed the actions, but if there's any major concerns today, council can endorse it at a later date. We just have to have that endorsement prior to executing a final agreement with CMHC. With this round, there's 400 million in funding available. The original round had 4 billion in funding, so we're at 1/10 of it. The funds are distributed based on number of anticipated units to be created with implementation of your HAF initiatives. So the federal government anticipates about another 12,000 units will be created with this 400 million in funding, and they anticipate about 100,000 units with the first round of funding at 4 billion. Revelstoke is considered a small/rural municipality with a population under 10,000 based on our 2021 census. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of debating the accuracy of that census today, but for our purposes, which does bode well for us, a little bit less competition, hopefully. So in August 2023, the city did submit our HAF Round 1 application. It was ultimately unsuccessful. We had 7 initiatives in there, kind of pared that back to have 5 initiatives within this application. As part of HAF Round 2, we can carry forward 2 of our original initiatives as part of our Round 2 application, which staff are recommending we do. HAF requires municipalities to identify their baseline number of dwelling units that we've approved over the last 5 years. So this serves as our baseline moving forward, and then any of the initiatives that result in more units being created, those are referred to as the HAF incented units. So this is just a little bit of a snapshot from our application, but you can see on average, going back to 2019, we issue permits that equate to about 121 dwelling units a year. Now, do keep in mind, we have a few big developments that kind of skew this. You know, the resort comes in and we got 2 employee housing buildings, 184 dwelling units right there that get issued in 1 year. So it does kind of fluctuate year over year. See, 2019, we only issued permits for 44 dwelling units. No turnover in City Hall, no building inspectors. We've rectified those issues now, and you can see as the numbers have gone up, especially over the last few years. So getting into the action plan. We have 5 initiatives within this action plan. First initiative is a carry forward from our original application. So looking at beefing up our role in partnerships with the local non-market housing sector. So really what this comes down to is supporting them through disposition of surplus and underused land, as well as financial support. It's already partially complete. So in 2024, we completed the Housing Solutions Project, where council solidified our direction that we want to support the non-market housing sector through disposition of land and financial support. I'm not going to go down the road of a housing authority or a housing corporation quite yet. We did the Oscar Street Master Plan, February 2024, looking at about 400 units being created on that over the next 20 years. We did have direct financial support to the Revelstoke Community Housing Society in the amount of about $200,000. And then Mr. Black and his team are currently working on pre-servicing land for Oscar Street so that it is build ready. To complete this initiative, what we would have to do if we are successful with the HAF application is further funding to our local nonprofits, capacity building for them to be able to scale up, to take on new scale of development, as well as offsetting the cost of development. So this money can be used to offset things like DCCs. We already reduced DCCs for nonprofits by 50%. This could make it a 100% reduction for them with HAF money. We'd also be looking at implementing a policy next year that would solidify the city's relationship between our local non-market housing partners. And this ensures longevity as we go forward, as well as consistency for them. We anticipate 24 HAF incented units as a result of this initiative. So that equates to 1 apartment building on the Oscar Street lands over the next 3 years, and we anticipate that to come online. Keep in mind, it's just building permit issuance in about year 2, so 2026. Initiative number 2. So we call this one eliminating zoning restrictions to density. So kind of trying to play off of the application materials that the HAF program coordinators have provided to make sure that we're responding to what they're looking to see in this application. So this one is another carry forward, and it includes completion of our comprehensive zoning bylaw rewrite. What this really comes down to is looking at how we can increase density. So gentle densification, following suit that the province has required us, 4 units per lot. and switching the way that we calculate density for mixed use and multifamily residential development projects from a units per hectare calculation to a floor area ratio calculation. I'm sure I bored council at length at going over that this year, so I'm not going to delve into it, but in a nutshell, it incentivizes the creation of more small units within one piece of land. So instead of an apartment building with 9 very big luxurious units, you might have an apartment building with 20 smaller, more modest sized units in there. So adoption of the new zoning bylaw would represent completion of this initiative, and we anticipate 36 half-incented units as a result of this initiative over the first 3 years. Now, council may be saying 36 units and all this work you guys have done for the zoning bylaw over the next 3 years, that's not very much. The numbers are quite conservative. We've had a lot of discussions with our CMHC rep, and she has given us a lot of good advice about how we can be in the best position possible to ensure the city's success with this grant application on round 2. And the underwriters that review this, they're looking to make sure your numbers are very reasonable. So 36 represents about a 10% increase above our baseline. If we have 136 and we're saying we're going to be 80% above our baseline, right away, that's a red flag for the underwriters that are reviewing this. So to keep that in mind, the numbers are a bit conservative. We won't get penalized for, being conservative, but if we overestimate and we can't make that, then we could get penalized through this application. So initiative number 3, this is a new initiative that wasn't included on our original application. We would be looking at implementing in 2025 a pre-reviewed accessory dwelling unit plan. So it's kind of a pre-approved plan for a garden suite, carriage suite, secondary suite, as well as a grant program. So we anticipate that this could create 36 units within 3 years, and we'd be looking at dishing out $10,000 per ADU, as we have to develop the specific parameters of that grant program. But this was a very popular initiative that was scored very well for the half applications and was recommended in accordance with the 10 best practices for half applications. It would be stackable, so you guys may recall the province has announced recently that you can apply for $40,000 in funding for an accessory dwelling unit to be constructed on your property. It would be stackable. So it does start to become quite viable for people to take advantage of these programs. Initiative number 4, again, would be a new initiative not included in our original application, basically looking at implementing software to expedite the review procedures for building permit and development applications. Mr. Gibbs has already been kind of leading the charge on this within the Development Services Department, and this would allow us further resources to expedite implementation of this e-permitting solution. And we anticipate this could reduce staff times in reviewing building permit applications specifically by about a quarter, so 25%. So, getting it down maybe a week, 1 to 2 weeks for our review times from 4 to 6 weeks down to, 3 to 4 weeks potentially. And we are looking at about 15 half-incented units as a result of this initiative, which represents about a 5% increase year over year. And then the last initiative would be looking at implementing a density bonusing program. So originally when we were doing the zoning bylaw, we wanted to include density bonusing as part of that comprehensive rewrite. But another piece of provincial legislation came out in April 2024, Bill 16, which changed the game and changed the rules for density bonusing. And we're still waiting on the final bits of information to come in from the province, which we anticipate January 2025. So it won't be there in time for us to incorporate into our zoning bylaw project. And it is a bit more involved than what density bonusing has been in the past. We have to do an economic analysis. We have to engage with the local development community to make sure that it's actually viable to implement density bonusing. So this initiative would take advantage of the new provincial legislation and get funding to ultimately get this over the finish line. We'd anticipate working on this early in 2026, maybe the end of 2025. And so we're looking at about 20 half-incented units, 10 in 2026 and 10 in 2027. So we had already talked about this a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but just a very important note for council to be aware of. Again, we do have quite a full work plan in 2025 right now. We got to complete the zoning bylaw if it's not done by 2024. Potentially short-term rental review. We're going to have that discussion with council in October. So you may tell us, yes, we want you to do this project ASAP. Non-market housing policy that was referred to earlier, housing needs assessment that is due by January 2025 as per provincial legislation. And then we are in the midst of reviewing our business license bylaw and all the fees, which has proven to be quite the task to go through. Part of the HALF program scoring includes how quickly you can implement the initiatives. So if we say we're not going to implement this stuff until year 3, we get 1 point. If we say we're going to implement it in year 1, then we get 5 points. So really, really critical to be speedy in implementing these initiatives. So you will see us prioritizing the HAF initiatives to get complete, to make sure that we're living up to our end of the bargain if we are successful with this application. So, there could be delays in day-to-day processing of applications, as well as some of the policy projects that staff are currently working on. But as always, we'll make sure council is well informed if we are successful with this. And do note too that it's not just the Development Services Department, the Engineering Department, Corporate Services, Finance will be involved. Finance would have to work with us on implementing a grant program for Initiative 3. So there are impacts beyond the Development Services Department as well. So just real high level, when we look at comparable communities, they've gotten about 2.5 to 4 million through the HAF program. So that's what we can kind of anticipate. As we're finalizing these numbers, we are looking at about 4.2 million for our final application to be submitted. But basically, if we are successful with this application, then there's a longer, more drawn out negotiation process with CMHC to really solidify those numbers. So that's why you don't see anything in the report as such a solid number. But right now we are at about that $4.2 million range. The anticipated cost to implement all 5 of the HAF initiatives is about 1.3 million. So you can see if we are successful, and if that 4.2 million number rings true, we're probably going to be at about $2 million that can be used for community and housing related infrastructure projects. With Mr. Black and his team will be very happy, I'm sure, to receive that money and sort out how to spend it. So that concludes the presentation and staff recommendation. I'll take it off the screen here because you guys already had it on the table before you, and staff can answer any questions you have.
Great. Councilor Orlando, you had your hand up. Was your question answered, or do you have something further you'd like to ask? You're muted.
Your worship, not really a question of staff, just a comment when we get to that point.
Okay. Councilor Palmer.
One question, the 40,000 grant that was available, is that not fully subscribed with the province?
Through sorry, Councilor Paul, just clarify the $40,000 for the accessory dwelling unit program.
The provincial program, because you said it was stackable with that, and I'm just wondering if there's any, I'm a little bit surprised if there's any money left in that, or you may not know, I guess.
Yeah, we'd have to follow up to see where they're at with that specific program and if there's going to be more funding that's available. But if it is still available, we would have no issues developing the parameters of the grant program so that it is stackable with any other grants that can be made available.
And I'm sure it was there already, but the due date for the application?
Through September 13th, so this Friday at midnight.
Right, okay. And I think you mentioned it already, it opened when?
Through worship, it opened July 15th on the portal, and we have been tirelessly meeting with our CMHC rep trying to round out this application. And we were meeting with our CMHC rep as late as last Friday to get some final answers, especially one of the tricky things for this application that has resulted in it being a little bit longer on the go is the carry forward initiatives. We had a lot of questions about prior costs. So for example, the pre-servicing of the Oscar Street lands, is that an eligible cost that we could put in the HAF application? And one of the key things that we were really waiting on to get information on is the elephant in the room, this BC Housing Downey Street project, 167 units. If those are included in our HAF application as HAF incented units under Initiative 1, partnering with nonprofits, then our numbers would go up substantially. And what we were told is if you include those, your application is going to raise red flags and it's basically going to be tossed in the bin right away.
And so Mayor Souls and Council, the timing is interesting, political. I wonder if by chance the government falls, implication, and maybe we don't have the answer, if the government falls, this whole program continues.
Through your worship, if there is a change in federal government, the administration of it might look a little bit different from a reporting perspective, I would imagine, but it is legislated law. Like this was part of the National Housing Strategy, so the money is allocated.
Okay.
And I could only imagine the political storm it would create.
Good. So Mayor Souls, I'll just speak to the motion briefly. I split it out. I'm definitely in favor of that. The second part of the proposed motion, we got awesome CAO great stuff. He's a get things done kind of guy. However, the motion is a little bit too broad for my comfort there's big. And so that's why I didn't add that on, but that'll be a separate discussion.
Okay, good. Councillor Orlando, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, Your Worship. Yeah, just to speak to the motion before us, I would encourage council to support this. First of all, I want to thank staff across many departments, including leadership responsible with the second round application, also staff involved in the first application last year, which in part informed our current application. Just a tremendous amount of work. Obviously, the timeline's not great through the summer, so making it even more challenging. So again, thank you for your work doing that. Also like to thank CMHC staff for their assistance, and note that CMHC staff did attend in person in Revelstoke for a housing summit that was earlier this year at the Regent Hotel, including other stakeholders. So just thanks to see people in person here working towards housing success here. A specific comment I wanted to add is I did reach out as the council representative to Revelstoke Community Housing Society and board member there to senior leadership who have contributed to this application and worked with staff working on the application they have reviewed the package that's before us today, and they're in support of it, and really looking forward to seeing benefits that would be put forward with this application. The timing of it, I don't know. This did start in the summer. Obviously, staff had to work hard over the summer. There has been changes at the federal level in Ottawa that we are not in control of, nor could anticipate. So we'll see what happens. But I would like to really encourage Revelstoke Council to support this application, and just want to commend staff on working hard. Great job. And I would note last Christmas, the Housing Society Board also spent the holidays putting together their application for the Downey Street project, and unfortunately, for some reason, the timing seems to be bad for this hard work. And just again, thanks again for putting the work in and meeting this deadline, and encourage council to support it. Thank you.
I'll ask one last time if there's any other comment on this. Seeing none, all those in favor of this motion? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Councillor Palmer, you have something in your mind?
Yeah, just trying to massage the motion. I move that the Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to enter into contribution agreements and minor amending agreements that may be required should the city be approved for funding under the program.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Cherry, you want to expound on that?
Yeah, it's just, I look at the words too deeply, probably. So I just added the word minor in there. So if there's something really substantive, it'll come back to council.
Okay. All right.
Just a comment on that. More of a question. Is the intent of this and the way it's written, whether originally or amended, to facilitate anything that happens between now and Friday outside of a council meeting, or through the future? To the chair.
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, Councillor Cherry, this would basically be if we are successful with our half application after submitting it this Thursday or Friday. That is basically our foot in the door with CMHC. They say you are successful. Then it's a long drawn out process. Like for example, Euclid, they just entered into their agreement after I think it was 8+ months of negotiation. And we will certainly be giving council updates if we are successful as to the status of it. And if there's any major changes, we would certainly come back to council to make sure that the action plan you're endorsing today is reflective of the action plan we're going to implement.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Appreciate that. Just before we move on to correspondence, are you okay staying, Councillor Stapleton?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You're okay for a bit? Okay. So item 12A, Revelstoke Grizzlies, Revelstoke minor hockey request. Mr. Nato, do you want to weigh in on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have anything further to add. We've put forward a recommendation. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Okay. Someone on council want to put this forward, Councillor Cherry?
Thanks. So I move that a service level review, including associated financial impacts, be prepared for the 2025 budget considerations in response to the Revelstoke Grizzlies Hockey Association and Revelstoke Minor Hockey request for an earlier start date for ice programming.
Councillor Luciano is seconding. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Palmer and Councillor Orlando.
Just a question through the director, with the committee for approving public events, are they involved with this, or is that not necessary with this?
Mr. No?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Palmer, that's not necessary for this process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Orlando.
Your Worship, yeah, just a question of staff. I was wondering if we could get a little bit more detail on what the service level review would entail in relation to this request. And the second part of the question relates to technical ability for this request. Obviously, it's hot in the summer and requires more energy and or strain on the system to cool the ice. And the third part is regarding other users during the slot of the arena who might be using that at this time. Will that be part of this review? Thank you.
Mr. Neto.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Orlando, the intent would be to come back to council with with additional operating costs to accommodate the request and the financial implications, including revenues, expenses, and the impacts to the existing user groups.
Answer your question, Councillor?
Your Worship, yeah, if I could, through the chair, just direct one more question, and that is just for clarification regarding revenue. So does that mean that staff would be seeking additional revenue sources as a result of this request in order to, for example, facilitate this?
Through Your Worship. So I have reached out to both groups to ask them exactly how much ice time they would be booking during the additional period. So working with the finance director, we would bring forward a projection of the potential revenue during that time period, along with the associated operating expenses for that time period for council to consider.
Answer your question, Councillor Orlando?
Your Worship, it does. I, however, want to address the second part of the question, and there might not be an answer at this point, but regarding the infrastructure that is in place, obviously we've got an old building. We know about our roof and concrete issues, but in addition, will that report coming forward address issues such as wear and tear, specifically as I've learned about in the past, related to the impact of flooding the rink earlier during much hotter times when it is involves more wear and tear and power costs to make ice.
Mr. Neto?
Through Your Worship, yes, I will be working with the Director of Finance to estimate those costs, and that will be included in the report as well.
One more question, Councillor?
Your Worship, just the part of the question I through the chair was just seeking a bit more clarity if that will also include sort of an engineering perspective on running the system in the summer, running it for longer in the summer, if there's any concerns related to that.
Mr. Neto, comments on
that? Through Your Worship, we have a company that supports us in that process with the arena startup. So we will be reaching out to them to ask them if there's any specifics that we need to pay particular attention to and what the impacts would be. So they could assist in helping us forecast that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to comment to council that although this was brought forward by both the Revelstoke Minor Hockey and the Revelstoke Grizzlies while attending an ice users meeting, I forget the date, in the last 2 months, I believe, there was other interested parties as well for an earlier start date for the rink. So just want to make sure council knows that this isn't just an isolated instance.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Seeing no other questions? We put this on the table, I'm losing my mind here.
Yeah.
All right. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. All right. Moving on to item 12B, Tourism Revelstoke letter. Mr. Parliament, you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for council's background information, I was advised by Tourism Revelstoke that the association representing them based out of Vancouver, Tourism Association, brought attention to 2 resolutions that are before the UBCM resolution floor for 2024. One is submitted by the city of Fernie and one is submitted by the city of Revelstoke. They're essentially identical resolutions asking the province to expand the eligibility of MRDT funds to meet some of the costs, the tourism costs and the infrastructure costs related to both communities, both being resort municipalities, essentially asking the province to consider expanding the eligibility. The city of Fernie was approached by their tourism operator, as we were, in that both feel, both operators, both DMOs feel that consultation was not adhered to, and they're asking for a rescinding of that resolution. I did meet with Tourism Revelstoke, and I basically agreed with them that before we go to the province asking to expand the eligibility of MRDT, it is best in the interest of furthering relations to consult with Tourism Revelstoke. Corporate Services has confirmed that any withdraw of any motion already before UBCM must be done at UBCM on the floor. So you basically go before the membership, you identify yourself as municipality XYZ, and you ask for a motion to rescind that particular resolution. Fernie has confirmed that they're going to be doing just that. For the same reason I'm recommending we do the same, that we should consult with our operator, being that the accommodators did sign on to collect the MRDT and that it's all based on a strategic plan, and we need to consult with them if we're going to ask for any changes of MRDT funds. Having said that, I did tell Tourism Revelstoke that there was no malice intended. We went through SILGA this spring with a identical resolution, simply asking the province, as the MRDT fund grows, we, the municipality, are always looking for revenues to help pay for some of the infrastructure ills associated to tourism. We totally support tourism, but there's costs associated with it. So with that, you see the letter. I asked Tourism Revelstoke to write a letter. They submitted you a letter asking for you to consider rescinding that resolution during your BCM next week. My final comment is, based on my 25 years of experience of attending UBCM, because it's item number 64 and Fernie's is item number 63, the chances of that resolution even making it to the floor are probably 30% at best. And both resolutions don't have a recommendation from the resolution committee of UBCM because there has been no previous resolution asking for a overhaul of MRDT. So if you read your resolution books, it's all in the detail there. So I'm not too worried whether or not the motion passes to rescind, because I just don't feel, being that the motion hasn't been recommended by the resolutions committee and that it is a late number, I'm not even sure if it even get to the floor. But in advance of next week, we felt imperative to bring it to your attention and seek some direction from council on this particular matter. So with that, that concludes my comments, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Parliament. Having read the letter, and my initial comment was, no, we are the recipients of the MRDP funds. I was looking at it saying, we need to be able to direct the MRDP funds. But having heard what you said, and the fact that it hasn't been endorsed, and there is probably a little box that says, have you consulted with your operator or your tourism group? And we would have to say no. Anyway, Councilor Palmer, you have any other?
Yeah, I'll make a
resolution?
Resolution that UBCM policy NR 64, that council requests rescinding that request at UBCM.
I'll second that motion.
Then I'd like to speak to it. So I saw the letter, and then I was surprised. They were surprised, and started to wonder about what happened. So from my lens, the council, we fumbled on this. So back in March, there was a resolution from council to have two councillors work with staff to put 4 resolutions before SILGA. That motion was actually one to retroactively approve something that had already been done. I was opposed to that, as was another councillor. And so there was some emails that went back and forth from what I can find, because I was saying, well, how come I don't know about this and it's coming before UBCM? And in the flaw one, I've sort of been pounding on all along that we should be meeting as a council on UBCM on policy and that kind of thing. This would fall into that, as well as ministry meetings. I think it's a shortcoming of us. And this is a good example of that shortcoming. So, how did that happen? So I think that resolution was in error. The process was broken at that level. I looked at the other ones. So I noticed that at UBCM, if I may, this is slightly off topic, but it's directly related to these resolutions. So said, okay, well, there was 4 resolutions that went to SILGA. What happened? And I didn't know what they were. So I started digging, and yes, there was an email saying, look down at the resolution booklet. I have the UBCM resolutions right now. It's this thing. I accidentally printed it on my printer, a full batch of paper. So anyway, they're printed out for me. And so it's, well, where's the other one? I couldn't find the other 2. I couldn't find them. So I started digging back. So the other 2, which if we had discussed them at the very least, I think there would have been some massaging of them. I think they were poor resolutions. And I'm assuming at the SILGA, because they didn't endorse them, so they don't go to UBCM. So they were not really robust motions at the end, so they were taken off. We'll go into the detail of that. There is another one, ED 91, sponsorship Revelstoke, that we have not discussed, which I see as being extremely problematic. Speak to that briefly. I'll try and be brief. And so the resolution that we have right on the floor right now is for the rescinding NR 64. After this, I'll be asking for rescinding of ED 91 as well, for much the same reasons. So I think the CAO has gone, and thank you for that, Mr. Parliament, gone through. So I think with that resolution, but I will be prepared, and I'll speak to the other one after. Thank you, Mayor Souls.
Councillor Lander, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Your Worship. I had my hand up, and Councillor Palmer's made a couple points, and I am repeating them just because I think they are important. Number one, he did point out that these resolutions were sent to SILGA prior to council actually approving them. And that was noted at the time at the council table when we asked about that. The process is for the 16 or so years I've been attending council meetings is they go to SILGA, and then if they're approved there, they move on to UBCM. The second issue was the process around wordsmithing, developing, and sending the resolutions forward. As council is aware, a couple of them, I believe two, were rejected out of hand and did not even make it to the floor at SILGA. And in my view, that was because we did come together as a team to ensure their success by wordsmithing them appropriately and understanding the context. In the past, early this week, and I realized not a lot of time, I did reach out to staff for clarification of our policies and procedures around resolutions such as this that are going forward to UBCM, as well as the wording of the ministerial meetings and provincial staff meetings we are seeking. I feel it's not as tight as it could be, it's not as tight as it should be, and that leads to lack of cohesiveness in our effort to be Team Revelstoke and be strong advocates for our community there when it's like I'm not really sure what we're doing or who's writing it or what's going on. So looking forward, we need to tighten this up next year. It's not going to be acceptable to me to do it again this way. With this particular resolution, moving forward, as a result of that, I agree with the mayor in the sense that you want to say, well, this is, something that we are free to lobby for ourselves. If we want to, as the primary recipient is the municipality for this funding. But given the concerns expressed in the process that's led up to it, I can't stand there and defend this and say, yeah, we did this right. That's not to necessarily say we need to consult with every party going forward. Wouldn't help, wouldn't hurt. But that opportunity to reach out to people, I feel, has been kind of denied in the sense that, these things are going forward with not really a clear process on how we're going to do it. So I'd like to end with a question, and that is, I didn't, and again, it might have been in the emails that I didn't get to it this week, but do we have a clear policy in place for the development of these resolutions, as well as the seeking out of lobbying efforts and collaborating on what we're asking for, other than seeking what everyone wants to do and then finding out later what we're going to be going to ask for there. So if that maybe is through the mayor, through administration or staff, if there would be an opportunity to answer that question now, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm going to go to our CAO, Mr. Parliament.
Okay, unless the corporate officer wants to correct me, I assume that, and pretty much can say with confidence, it's a hard no. We don't have a policy on specific resolutions that direct council to consult with stakeholders, properly word resolutions, et cetera, maybe that's something we can consider in a proposed governance committee, but there is no set policy as of today. We sort of just, in short, wing it. Okay, thank you.
So, Councillor Stephanus, you had your hand up.
No, I did have a question, but it's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I would like to make a few points because I think they're important in the general sense. I'm going to speak to the one on the motion rather than the general on the resolution we're going to have later. So just specifically with the MRDT and the Fernie, like the CAO said, Fernie did kind of the same thing. So just a couple comments. One, we do have a council representative with the Tourism Revelstoke. So, and I'm not faulting anything, but at very minimum, somehow should have landed there for some kind of dialogue. And then more importantly, is our partners with the MRDT tax. I think there's
the RMI communities,
the IRS, yes. So in the past, and I'm not sure if this continues, and I think you may know Mayor Souls, that they would meet like once a year in one of the communities and talk about things of common interest.
Right.
And then they also met typically either the CAO or the Economic Development Officer or the mayor or some combination of that at UBCM to make sure they're on the same page as far as resolutions at UBCM and so that there's this collective voice going ahead. So aside from the so I'll ask that question, whether that carries on.
So we meet once a month and kind of discuss in general terms, broad terms, issues in each community and talk a little bit about what we're thinking about for UBCM. And then traditionally, what the CAO and I would do would meet with the RMI, our colleagues on the Monday prior to UBCM. This year, it's been changed because there's no ministers there.
Yeah.
We're not meeting until, we would take the whole day on the Monday. We're not meeting till 7:30 on Friday for 2 hours after the fact.
Fuck you.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. So just speaking sort of generally to the effective resolutions at UBCM, there's a big thing, and like the CEO said, a lot of these are just going to fall off. There's a process, so they don't disappear entirely.
You've seen them where they group them together as a group and nothing ever happens.
Yeah, generally.
Yeah.
They can come back. The effective resolutions is when communities partner on resolutions, they become much more effective. You've already had some collaboration, they're better worded, and those are the ones that you typically see to be successful, not so much in passing, but successful in changing provincial policy. Right. Because rather than just one whiny little community, it's a collective of communities saying this is important. And so with that, that's the importance with that collaborative, with the tourism resort communities and making sure that happens. So it maybe is something that's sort of slipped a little bit. So it's something to keep in mind.
Well, even last year, Councillor CO and I had 2 or 3 meetings with our RMI communities, but one of them was with 2 ministers present.
Yes.
And we're able to get things done
Yes.
with the ministers present.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, is having these discussions ahead of time. This seems to have dropped off the table with all 14 of us as to how we are able to move things forward, because the government seems to be, not going to say change the rules, but a little bit loosey-goosey as to how we move forward.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you, Mayor Souls. Good.
Sport.
So Mayor Sauls, I just want to give you kind of a background on how all of the resolutions came forward. We received a letter from SILGA requesting resolutions on January 9th. It came to the council meeting. At that time, it was deferred to the February 15th Committee of the Whole. The recommendation at the Committee of the Whole was that staff work with councillors Luciano and Cherry to prepare resolutions on the 4 items. We did work together with Allison at SILGA to come up with the resolutions. She was working, I can't remember who she was working with, but someone else back and forth to make sure that they would satisfy UBCM. And then the problem with referring it to February 15th was that there was a February 29th deadline to get it to SILGA. So that's kind of a little bit of the background. Now, having said that, we didn't have to wait till January 9th till we got the letter to ask for resolutions, because we know that every year they ask. So I think going forward, perhaps we could discuss this in December and give us more time.
Good point. Thank you for that. All right. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Councillor Luciano, then I'll go back to Councillor Orlando.
Thank you, Marcellus. Yes, as the one who brought this forward, there was no malice intent towards Tourism Revelstoke or any of the tourism operators. I very much understand that collaboration needs to be had. I'm supportive of withdrawing this so we can have a better collective voice coming back to the province in regards to this.
Great, thank you. Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, thank you. Just a point of clarification. I want to make it clear from from my perspective that this is not, my comments are not directed at staff at all. These resolutions are political resolutions, and it's incumbent upon council to do our homework and do our heavy lifting, and also understand the process and write them on our own. So in terms of, my responsibility in that, I could have given other councillors putting resolutions forward more heads up, offered to reach out ahead of time. I did, after they were initially rejected, I did reach out to councillors with some resources to revise them to see if they would seek to get success on the floor at Silga. But certainly it's upon all of us. And, I just wanted to say that the path to success is all council clearly agreeing on these resolutions, having it clear what we're doing, and heading to UVCM with be it ministerial meetings or resolutions for UVCM, and being united in our calls. And as we engage in that process, I would love to start earlier this year and move forward with our resolutions. Next UVCM we'll have a new government, and whoever that is, and it's a real opportunity to hit the ground running and learn from some of the challenges we face next year and make an impact this year and make an impact next year.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. Councillor Palmer, you have another resolution?
Yeah, so I move that UVCM resolution EB 91, short-term rental tax class, be rescinded at UVCM.
So there's a seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Staples.
I'll speak to the motion.
Go ahead.
So much of the same conversation of where this has come. This one is slightly different. The previous one was a no recommendation, so it's right at the tail end.
Yeah.
This one is an endorse, and it's a block endorse. And so it's voted with a whole bunch without debate, unless someone goes up and has it removed or rescinded. So when I read this, I was a bit alarmed. So I understand the good intent behind it, but there's in the wording there, I think it's seriously problematic. I could go into that right now, but if council's supportive of just removing it, and if we can look at this for next year if it has merit. So that's what I would encourage, rather than me go into the details right now as to what I see as problematic to it.
Sure. Any comments or concerns from council regarding that? Go ahead.
Yes, this was my motion, I believe. It's been supported by Silga. I stand by it. I think that we're in a position to implement it. It's been endorsed. If you'd like it rescinded, I'd like to know why.
Okay, so Mayor Solis, I'll certainly do that.
Sure.
Reason number one, council didn't debate this. We did not debate this. We didn't have this and review it collaboratively. Reason number one. Reason number two, I think there is severe unintended consequences coming from this, specifically on the suggestion of class 6 of where we start taxing residents in the class 6 zone. It's opening up Pandora's box, quite frankly. And we need to be very, very careful. So the part of the of creating a new tax classification, that's one thing. But the way it's written is allows the province to allow class 6 to be applied to individual residents and that have home-based businesses. And that I see as severely complex. So that's the reason why I think it needs to be rescinded, so it can be thought through. Yes, Silga probably thought, good intentions. Okay, there's some good ideas here, but it's problematic. In the event that it isn't rescinded, I will be going up as an individual councillor and asking for it to be removed from the block voting, and I will speak against this motion for that very reason. I believe I will get support from UVCM as a whole, because I think it will create a big problem throughout the province.
And so, Councillor Cherry, you want to?
Yeah, I widely disagree. So that'd be the first way I start. And the terminology is used as changing short-term rentals to class 6 or other. This is not a new resolution. It was seen, I believe, 2017.
Yes, I got it in front of
Yes, I
me.
think so.
2017, 2018, 2020, and 2019, yes.
And the comments from the province were that there was no provincial registry, so that they couldn't apply this at the time. They commented that PST and GST were being charged on STRs. What I've heard from the community is that if residents are going to use their houses as short-term rentals, full-time short-term rentals, that they should be paying a commercial tax rate, as that's both fair for hotels as well as taxation for the rest of the community. So with that said, I don't feel this should be rescinded. And I understand I may feel differently than Councillor Orlando.
Councillor Palmer.
Sorry, apologies, Councillor Palmer, not Councillor Orlando.
Councillor Palmer, you have
Yeah.
comment?
Yeah, so this is the dialogue that we needed to have so that there was a debate amongst us. And then if we had had that debate, I think there would have been some tweaking on the wording, I suspect, but that didn't happen. And so I don't think now is the time to go into that. It's not the time now to debate the merits of this particular resolution, but I've explained my concerns on that. So it's in addition to all those things we talked about with the previous one, it's additional to this.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Orlando.
Yeah, Your Worship, just for clarity, I believe these were the only two resolutions that made it to UBCM from Revelstoke. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, Your Worship. Yeah. I think, some of the procedural stuff that's happening here is new to me. I was not aware, for example, of the ability to seek to have it pulled from a block vote, but there's always something new to learn in local government. I guess, I just want to emphasize my previous message on this. If we go to the floor on our only two resolutions that got there and vote to have those removed, I mean, that's kind of a definition of crash and burn for us on this process. And I want to look to doing better next year. And I'll say the quiet part out loud, UBCM resolutions, some of them are impactful. Many of them just kind of get put off in the books and never to be heard of again. I don't know that the specific wording of this will be impactful either way, but it might prompt government to look at tax regimes, because certainly there is a challenge in our community or in many communities across BC where things are either full-time accommodation, part-time accommodation for part of the year, and we don't really have the tax fairness for other accommodators who are charged full taxation rate, and also incumbent challenges that end up incentivizing converting housing into short-term rentals as opposed to not. So I am on the fence here, and I'm trying to think out loud. I guess my preference would be to not publicly tear down both of our resolutions, but council is free to do what they want, and I do understand some of Councillor Palmer's concerns about how it's worded. But in the end of the day, I don't know if it's such a big deal, because it might just be a contributing part of a chorus to seek tax reform for new realities that we have in the province in the way that short-term rentals and rentals are managed. Thanks.
Appreciate the comment. I'm actually going to not support the motion to remove it, because in previous years we had conversation with BC Assessment, and they said there was no mechanism repeatedly over the years, no mechanism for them to have a class structure for short-term rentals. And I'm seeing now that we may be with what provincial government's bringing in short-term rental, or maybe the rules, that there may be a chance for us to be heard this time. I'm understanding Councillor Palmer's concern about the wording. I don't know whether that'll make an effect. We've seen in past years where this kind of motion has gone and it hasn't amounted to anything. At this late date, I'm just going to say, let's let it go, but that's from my personal perspective. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wasn't intending to speak in depth of the resolution. If the resolution was worded in a way of creating a new class, I would be supportive. I think it's a great idea. I think that was the initial intent behind this. It's the additional wording that creates some concerns. I talked about the class 6 component and possible unintended consequences going into other businesses, home-based businesses. And some people might say, well, that's a bit far-fetched, but I see that we're opening up that wedge, and I'm concerned about that. And I would say every small business, home-based business in the province should be concerned about that. That's where it goes provincial. There's a new tax classification specifically, be different. There was a second component, because that's the first component of this motion, and it goes on, which was amended at SILGA. And that it be further resolved. What was the original motion was municipalities do not see further commoditization of the housing industry. That was amended at SILGA, and to change to further, not further be resolved that the province continue to explore ways to reduce commodification of housing in consultation with local governments. The commodification of housing is it's an interesting word. I thought, okay, well, what does that mean? And I'll avoid, I think people generally will say what does that mean? There is some ambiguity, and I won't go into the definition. I did look at the definition and the implications. But the commodification of housing, if a person buys a house and sells it for a profit, there's a commodification. If somebody has a home-based business, there's a commodification. If somebody has a market garden, there's a commodification of housing. And so this is the kind of thing that I don't think has been thought through. And I'm not seeking to find an amendment right now, but that's why I will speak against this at UBCM. And so the embarrassment of the city of Revelstoke rescinding a motion, as opposed to the embarrassment of Revelstoke that is publicly conflicted, is possibly something for my colleagues to consider.
Right. Appreciate that. Councilor Chair.
Thanks, Mayor Sauls. As myself and Councilor Lucio, the ones that attended SILGA, I just wanted to comment on why this change was made. It's very difficult to say the mouthful of words that was there. I did stumble a couple times while on, and not just myself, as well as the speaker, trying to read this out the way it was written, which is why it was amended to be easier to say. The spirit is the transition to stop the transition of housing to commercial businesses, being STRs against hotels. But again, it is a mouthful to say, and we all kind of stumbled up there at SILGA.
So my final appeal.
Okay.
Let's rescind this. Let's bring it back later on and talk about it and get it right for 2025 UBCM.
Okay. Councilor Stippers.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to quickly weigh in on this. I think first things first, I think if this does go to SILGA, I think it's really important that as a council, that everybody at UBCM, that we endorse it, that we don't stand up and that we separate it out, and that we have this appearance of discombobulation. And I think that's, you know, as a council as a whole, like we can have this debate right now, we can have this discussion. You can not vote in favor of rescinding it, or you can vote in favor of rescinding it or not, whatever. But once it leaves this room and leaves this table, we collectively made that decision, and going in front of UBCM and telling the rest of council, I will publicly speak out against this as a councillor. I don't think that's necessarily the best approach, and I don't necessarily agree. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this resolution that's going in front of UBCM either, but that debate's already happened. There was another plan, I forget what it was. And then further to that, I think one of the reasons why I wouldn't be in favor of voting of this is there's a whole bunch of background noise with short-term rentals right now. I lack, there seems to be a lack of clarity as to what's the city's direction, and I don't feel like this is in sync with what's being presented by staff of, oh, okay, we're going to review this in October. But then now we're going to UBCM in September, and we're speaking out for a different tax classification, which could be viewed as punitive. So I don't necessarily feel like it's in sync with what staff is recommending, what staff is, prepared to bring to council. So I think on that note, I'll leave it at that, and we'll see how the rest of council votes. But that's just kind of my 2 thoughts on it, or 3.
Okay. Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, just one last comment. I try and come here with an open mind, and I understand what Councillor Palmer's saying, and I sort of changed my mind, and I'll support this. Another quiet part you don't say out loud is that it is UBCM in an election year, so it's not as certain parts of it are emphasized and other parts of it are de-emphasized. I really think that given the timing of the imminent election just after the convention, it's not as effective as coming with a team approach next year. So what I'd really like to see is strong, clear, vetted resolutions and lobbying on issues that we can all agree on next year. So that's my long-term goal. I really think there's a reputational risk with sort of being out there fighting amongst ourselves in a room full of 1,000 people and all of the provincial media to show up. So I'll support Councillor Palmer and just saying I think there's some valid points there, and it would be better to take a clean sheet approach next year and be on board. And the last thing I want to say is I believe this really strongly. Councils win as a team, and you lose as a team as well. And I want to go back next year and win as a team. I don't want to go there this year and lose as a team. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of rescinding this motion at UBCM? So we have all those opposed. So this motion is defeated. In favor, we had Councillor Staples, Councillor Orlando, Councillor Palmer. Against, we have balance of council. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to communications, Public Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Palmer, do you have comments on the August 22nd minutes?
Yes. If I may, Mayor, so I had sent an email that I intended to have a resolution regarding business arising. I failed to do that at that time. I'll leave it for later on, just in case anybody was wondering about that. So yeah, the last Public Infrastructure Committee was, there was a lot on the agenda. We met for a very, very long time. We talked about the DCCs already, and that was a very lengthy discussion. A couple important things was the composting facility. There is an update regarding where we're going. It's in the 2025 budget as far as curbside compost. A few other things there. One of the other ones that I can talk or discuss with staff if there needs to be any clarification. We're trying to align hoping to align the meeting dates with alternating with the committee of the whole every second week, so there's the same kind of pattern. the committee was wanting to continue at the 12 o'clock time, however. There was dialogue on the airport, bioheat, and a discussion on the log jam and the Silwood Bridge. I think that was everything.
Okay, thank you. Any comments for Councillor Palmer regarding those minutes? Councillor Orlando?
Your worship, yeah, thank you. And through the chair, just an additional question. At the last meeting, I believe it was council meeting, I asked for subsequent public infrastructure committee meetings to be recorded so that people unable to attend are allowed to or have the opportunity to review the meeting. Just in looking at these minutes, you know, there's a lot of really consequential projects. There's a lot of big ticket items there. And my feeling is, wow, I'm missing out on this this content. Staff did commit to videotaping them and recording them. So that's great. I'm sure we'll see that at our next meeting. I have a question, and that is quite specific. The minutes as well as the agenda do not have a lot of background reports attached to them. So my request of staff in addition is to include any like overhead projector presentations for this meeting and make an addendum to attach them as a link. And also to have those included in subsequent meetings that are recorded so that we can go and review the reports, see these documents, so that we'll have be up to speed on these fairly significant developments. And the third comment is that I believe that as is happening, some of these items should be going to Committee of the Whole in addition to the Public Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. Some of them also, you know, in my view, should perhaps be, you know, in addition going to ECDEV for review, for commission review, or going to Committee of the Whole and Public Infrastructure, or just Committee of the Whole instead. So I'd like to see that tightened up. And the main thrust of my comment is that these are important, big ticket, expensive, multi-million-dollar projects. And the way we have structured our information is a lot of this is happening with only a few people in the room with verbal only comments. And that I'm not comfortable with that. We need to be more formal in our processes and show our homework and show our work as we move these things along, and many of which ultimately have a big ask for taxpayers at the end of the day. And we need to show them how we get to our conclusions when we do. So thank you very much. And I do appreciate staff's responsiveness to the request last week. It was very much appreciated. Thank you.
Any other comments regarding PIC? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, is Councillor Orlando, are you asking me to respond to some of those? Because I said definitely those items, I can definitely respond to some of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd really welcome that, Councillor Palmer. I know we've discussed privately some of the issues and concerns, and I know we're you know, have similar things on some things. We might disagree on other things, but yeah, I absolutely appreciate that, and I have appreciated the discussions we've had so far about these topics. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Souls. Councillor Orlando raises some valid points. And as we move ahead in trying to improve the effectiveness of committees, there's been discussion on that. I hope to see some changes. Notably, sometimes there just isn't material on the agenda. In fact, at this, I was just reviewing the minutes. There was a statement I asked for to be recorded. It's not on there. We'll address that at the Public Infrastructure Committee. But a lengthy report that I still haven't received after a couple of months. And so we'll need to tighten up on that. On what comes to obviously there's a much higher interest in the Public Infrastructure Committee, as Councillor Orlando, they're substantive, some of the items. And so when I see that, I am inviting the non-member councillors to the meeting. That's what I did last time. Councillor Cherry was there. Councillor Land wasn't able to be there, but would have liked to. And then just on the, in general, there was some stuff that had already been before council. So we should be an advisory committee going to council, but once it's on the council table, it belongs there. DCCs is a notable one, really, that belonged with all of council. All of council should have been that. So now we're going to be repeat second go on it. So that some of the points that Councillor Orlando is very valid, and working with staff will try and improve those.
All right, appreciate the comments. Thank you all. All right, moving on to Finance Committee meeting. You saw today the some of the things that we dealt with was the tax thing for Mackenzie Avenue, the tax exemption, and then of course Ms. Moore showed council tax burden shift examples from residential to commercial, commercial to residential, that sort of thing. And that's pretty much took up the meeting. Any comments from council regarding that? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. Ms. Delaselle, do we have any questions from the press?
There are no questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, council, I'd like to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1 C and D of the community charter. Somebody want to make that motion? Councillor Lucia, second by Councillor Devlin. All in favor? Motion's carried. We'll come back in camera and we'll take a 10-minute break. When we come back in camera, my understanding is there will only